This is E&P Reports, a vodcast from Editor and Publisher magazine, the authoritative voice of news media since 1884, serving newspapers, broadcast, digital, and all forms of news publishing.
And greetings once again. I'm Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. As always, we kick off with housekeeping, where we ask our listeners on podcast platforms to please follow this program. Those watching on YouTube, please subscribe. That way, when we upload a new episode of E&P Reports, you get an alert and be the first to have the knowledge and wonderful views from great guests like Mickey Osterreicher. Mickey, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
It's been about a year. You don't get a jacket till you've been on 5 times.
I'll work on that.
But we have a new tradition on the program. In the old days, we used to look at your background on LinkedIn or wherever you have it posted and introduce to the audience with that diatribe. Now, because AI is so front of mind, we go to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT who the heck you are. So I'm going to read you to you via ChatGPT, and you're going to give it an A to an F rating. Are you ready?
Sure.
This is important. I don't know if you've done this, looked yourself up, but here's what I get. Mickey H. Osterreicher is a distinguished figure in the fields of photojournalism and media law, with a career spanning over 5 decades. He currently serves as general counsel for the National Press Photographers Association, we simply call NPPA. Professional background, photojournalism. You had extensive experience in both print and broadcast media. Your work was featured in the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, USA Today. We do have a picture I think will resurrect of you as a young photographer looking, kind of, 1960-ish. We may post that on the page if anyone wants to see you years ago. Legal experience, transitioning to law. Osterreicher earned his Juris Doctor cum laude from the University of Buffalo Law School. You were admitted practice in New York State and several federal jurisdictions, advocacy and training. You've been actively involved in matters such as cameras in the courtroom, federal shield laws, media access, public photography, and the use of drones for news gathering, and recognition. Osterreicher's contributions have been widely recognized. In 2015, the Society of Professional Journalists honored you as a Fellow of the Society, their highest professional honor. In 2021, you were inducted into the Buffalo Broadcasters Hall of Fame. The only thing they missed here is are you still a sheriff in your community, or
I am still doing that. Yes.
All right. So what's what I love about your background is not only are you involved in the issue, but you actually live the role, and you train people in law enforcement as well. Am I correct?
I do. I spend a good deal of time doing that.
The reason you're on this program is we recently published an article where you were part of a group that we asked to make prognostications about what the impact of the coming Trump administration may have on the news publishing industry. And I've got about 5 or 6 questions I'd like to ask you to augment that piece. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready. Is this the lightning round?
Yeah, it's going to be like speed dating, but tell you what, I'll give you a chance to catch your breath because we'll get to those questions right after this.
This episode of E&P Reports is exclusively sponsored by Blocks Digital, formerly Town News. Even though the name has changed, their commitment to the media industry is as strong as ever. Blocks Digital is now even better positioned to deliver integrated solutions like content management, audience development, advertising revenue, video management, and more. Join the over 2,000 news publishers worldwide that power their ongoing digital transformation with Blocks Digital, serving over 141 million monthly users who view over 6.5 billion pages of content each year. You can trust Blocks Digital to empower you, to connect you at scale with the community you need to reach. Blocks Digital, formerly Town News, now reimagined to help meet the news publishing challenges of tomorrow and beyond. Learn more at blocksdigital.com.
All right, Mickey, you may have heard of this, maybe not. Have you heard of Project 2025? He said sarcastically. Of course you have.
Unfortunately, I have.
Yeah, well, we took a look at the document, and it outlines policy priorities for a potential second Trump administration, including actions such as surveillance of reporters, scrutiny of broadcast licenses, and restricting press access to the White House. I didn't make that up. It's in the document. So, what advice would you give to newsrooms, both national and local, to prioritize any defenses against these possible changes? That's my first major question for you, sir.
Well, I don't know. Obviously, we've seen the 2025 project. There's been lots and lots of speculation. Again, the President Trump is coming in not as an unknown as he did in the first term. So I think that there are probably more fears there. I think he will probably be emboldened by the election results. And the advice, if I'm in a position to give advice, and maybe it's more advice that I give to myself,
Right.
is that we just really need to keep doing what we've been doing, and do it well and do it ethically. I think we need to take into consideration the fact that it seems that a good deal of the reporting that's being done is being disregarded. People are going to other sources. So I think that the news media really needs to be aware of that. And when I say keep doing what we've been doing, I don't mean it in that same sense of just keep doing the same old thing over and over again. I think that we need to, stick to basics, basic storytelling, being ethical. But I think we need to figure out ways um, to make journalism sustainable and profitable, because we've seen far too many news organizations folding.
Of
We've
course.
seen, at least for visual journalists and all journalists, we've seen far too many journalists losing their jobs. I know that our organization, the National Press Photographers Association, when I was first a member back in the early 70s, almost all of our members were staffers. They worked as employees for news organizations, whether newspapers or television stations, magazines, the wire services. And now, unfortunately, what we're seeing is that most of our members are freelancers. I mean, just earlier this week, I think it was. I mean, the news cycle is just going so fast that I don't know, was this week or last week? The AP announced layoffs.
Yep.
It's just every day we're hearing more and more news outlets are trimming staff, getting rid of entire photo staffs. So we just really need to focus on those basics, but also figure out a way to continue to be in business, both whether you're a business or as a photojournalist, a small business person being, a one-person operation where you're just trying to earn a living, but still trying to do the work and the storytelling in the right way.
During the first term, and we're looking back on that, it may not be, I mean, again, we may not be back at that, but during the first term, it was not uncommon to hear President Trump say things like the media is the enemy of the people. Some of his policies created some real, you know, issues like immigration reporting. There, us journalists were actually being threatened, on local levels for doing their coverage. And this has really gone through the industry now to a point where some journalists are just getting wary. I mean, or feeling just the pressure. I'll give you an example. We always in December get an amazing cartoonist named Rob Torno, works at the Philly Inquirer, to do a beautiful kind of a Christmas cover for us. Something journalistic, but part of the season. And one of the suggestions he gave us, ideas. One of them was to show a wintry scene of a journalist being pelted by snowballs, which Mickey we rejected. But you understand where we're going. What do you see in the future for protecting our reporters, making them feel like they can still feel emboldened? Am I making sense with this question? What
Sure.
advice would you give if you were running a newsroom and you got reporters saying to you, "Look, I'm getting a little scared out there"? It's getting a little, I feel like I'm at war. What advice would you give to those news executives that lead these teams, Mickey?
Um, I don't know how much advice I have for executives. I can tell you about the advice, and it's across the board that I give to photojournalists, who are out there on the front lines. They can't report from, during COVID from their basement. They need to be out there, whether it's COVID or curfews or anything like that. They're out there, and they're right at the front lines. And the first thing is you really need to maintain situational awareness. Uh, looking through the camera, looking through the viewfinder is constantly, or looking down at the image you might have just shot on the back of the camera is probably what's going to get you into trouble. But I know you're asking, the larger question, and I agree with you. I mean, we are constantly seeing, especially on January 6th, we saw many journalists attacked, lots of equipment get destroyed. That's one of the things that we worried about and continue to worry about during protests, because even though, as I said, I train with police, there are a lot of people out there on both sides of the political spectrum who don't want their pictures taken, or they don't want to be recorded, and they think that they have a right to tell journalists, you can't take my picture when you're out in a public place where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. So anybody can ask, but the point is, when you're out in public, you're photographed and recorded scores of times a day. Surveillance cameras, dash cams, body cams. So I think that reporters, photographers need to be aware of all the things that are going on out there, and make sure that they can kind of read the situation, which it could be constantly changing,
Right.
uh, have an exit strategy, hopefully work in pairs. And I know, again, and that would be more for news executives, that when everybody's trying to trim budgets and cut staff, to suggest that people don't go out there alone seems almost counterintuitive. Like, wait a minute, we don't have enough bodies to send more than one person. But I think in situations where you think that there's a high likelihood that something might happen, such as if you're covering a protest, I really don't think it's a good idea to send a reporter or a photographer out there alone.
All right. You and I have had this discussion offline, and I think we even touched on it when I interviewed you before. There are a lot of organizations advocating for the freedom of the press right now. A lot of them. I could, like NPPA, RCFP, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which is fired. Then you've got what, the SPJ. You've got your organization. You got the News Media Alliance. You have the NNA. You have the RTNDA, the NAB. I'm running through a whole mess of acronyms here, and they're all pushing a similar challenge, which is, we all know one of the things that's in Project 2025 raises the possibility of weaponizing the levers of power to suppress the free press. It's there, and you can do it in a number of ways. For example, MSNBC will be spun off now by Comcast. MSNBC is going to need a company to take it over. That could be blocked. Don't you agree? There could be ways these levers could be pulled. You're in the middle of this fight. Do you think it's time for some consolidation of all these voices? Should we have some master committee where you and the other people who are doing the advocacy for that all want us to row the boat in the same direction? Is that a fair question to ask you? And is that something we should really try to do for the next 4 years?
I think it's a fair question. I just don't know that it's a possibility. Just so you and your listeners and viewers know, we don't all just work like in our own little silos. We meet regularly. And when I say we, all those organizations that you've mentioned are constantly, one of the upsides of Zoom, besides doing this, is the fact that you don't have to go in person to meet somewhere, because again, everybody's worried about expenses. it doesn't have to be on just a telephone conference call. It can be by Zoom, where things can be presented, where notes can be shared and links can be shared, and all the things that technology brings us. But we all meet and we work together, whether we're talking about the Press Act or just the other day, HR 9475, which is a House bill that could possibly defund nonprofits. So even though we're different organizations, um, each of us kind of has our own constituency. Like, for example, NPPA, we are the voice of visual journalists. So I'm constantly keeping in mind photographers, and whatever meetings I'm at, whether it's there's bar associations too, which you didn't mention, that have media lawyers where all the media lawyers meet and talk about things. And, oftentimes the discussion doesn't necessarily take into account the photographers. So I think it's important for NPPA in particular to be there. RTDNA, again, talking with particularity about their constituency. So each one of us has a particular focus, but we are not just out there working individually and spinning our wheels. We're all trying to work together collectively and collaboratively. So I think having a bunch of diverse voices, but all in the same room and working together, I think is really important.
We're running out of time. So I'm going to ask you the final question, if I may
All
have be
right.
so bold. You've been in this industry, what, 5+ decades?
Yeah.
And you've got ink in your veins, you've got broadcast in your veins. You've done it all, from just being out there shooting to now advocating and leading one of the top organizations. Have you lost some of your Pollyanna attitude toward this industry? Do you feel post 2024 that we're in trouble more? Or do you still feeling a little bit positive? Or where are you at about the future of local journalism and our ability to be sustainable and part of the culture in general?
I don't know that I was ever Pollyanna about our industry, but I think it's just really incumbent upon journalists, especially, and you said local journalism, and I think I'm getting to the point, if I have something more than everything we've discussed to be worried about, is local journalism isn't necessarily local anymore. That a lot of local uh, papers, television stations are being owned, the stations in particular, by larger news organizations. I'm not going to name names,
Oh, we know
but
you. Yeah.
certainly there are a lot of local papers that are run by large corporations that don't necessarily have the local interests at heart. The journalists working there do, but not necessarily the management. So I think over the years, in order to stay in business, uh, you know, news organizations had to do whatever they had to do. But I think it's coming back to bite us in the fact that we're seeing, we're almost shooting ourselves, in the foot, one toe at a time here, rather than, at some point we're going to just maybe have to put a gun to our heads here, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, I just, as I kind of said in the beginning, journalists have to keep doing what they've always done in terms of storytelling, in terms of ethical journalism, in terms of good reporting. They just need to figure out a way to earn a living from doing that, and hopefully gain back the public trust on a much broader basis than apparently there is now. And that's a real problem, because there's a lot of people don't get the news the way they used to get it. They don't necessarily look at the morning paper if there's a morning paper in town. They don't look at the evening paper if there's an evening paper in town. They don't necessarily wait for the 6 o'clock or the 11 o'clock news and watch it in the way that they used to. And so all of those things in terms of the news market need to be addressed while still maintaining the basics.
Mickey Osterreicher, General Counsel for the National Press Photographers Association. Auxiliary Sheriff, I remember correctly, is your official title.
Reserve Deputy.
Reserve Deputy, excuse me, sir, Sheriff. And of course, good friend of E&P and a great voice for our industry, working hard every day. We appreciate your valuable time, sir. We know we'll have you back on the program, and thanks for being part of it.
Thank you very much. It's always good to talk to you.